Saved it. Okay, do you want to do the intro on this one? Or I guess I kind of
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Well, do you want to do it?
I can, yeah, I because I
I'll
kind of
do the
talk.
next one. I'll do the hot
Okay,
takes one. Yeah.
perfect. Hey Jabbers, welcome back to another episode. Today you are joined by Kari and myself, and we are hopping on for another mini-sode. And we want to talk about creating wedding budgets and designs that match that budget. I think this is a hot topic that I've actually recently talked about with a group of wedding planners here in Nashville. And I think Kari and I should have a little chat because the feedback I'm getting is that we don't know what the heck quotes are coming back as. We have trouble estimating what the budget is going to be with this in this economy. So let's talk about that today.
Yeah, I love it. This is a great topic because I think it starts kind of in the beginning, right? With a consultation call with a potential client and asking what their budget is. And oftentimes those clients don't know. And so it's sort of us trying to set an expectation, or maybe they have an idea of a budget. And I a lot of times have clients who are like, can you tell us, like, is that a good budget? Should we be budgeting more? And I'm like, it's such a hard question to answer because oftentimes I find clients have money coming from elsewhere, or like certain things, vendors, items are not included in that total budget, which can really skew something. And so obviously, if it's too low, I'm upfront about that, especially if I know like the venue and their guest count. But I think for me to give you a budget overhaul on a consultation call is impossible, honestly. So I think we can do our best in setting expectations for a normal client that we work with or the venue that they're getting married at. But a lot of the setting expectations comes once they're a client and we dive into their wedding specifically more and get to know what exactly they want for their vision. I guess, Gabby, tell me a little bit about what you do with your clients, or if you've had like a recent incident where you maybe set expectations or clients are not understanding the expectations and the budget cost.
Yeah, I want to talk about this because I felt like I needed to overhaul my process a little bit. How I was doing my design package. So a client with us we would only design for them if they were hiring us for either full service planning or what we call design and management. And broken down in that design portion of the design and management is florals, rentals, signage, like stationery invitations, candles, like small decor pieces, seating charts, that kind of stuff. So anything that's really we're doing a design, but we're not in charge of hiring their caterer, their DJ, or anything like that, even though in a way that is also kind of part of the design. So that package is a little harder to delineate and make sure we have boundaries up. And we have to work with a specific, kind of a specific budget, whereas the client is managing the other part of the budget for all the other vendors, catering, DJ, all that kind of stuff. So, what we were doing before is we would have, like you said, this like general kind of what we call the vision and budget call. And I would just ask, like, what are some of your priorities for the wedding? Where do you want to allocate? How do you feel about florals? Oh, we want more of an experience. We don't love florals as much. We'd rather spend on food, like that kind of stuff. So that's helping guide me a little bit on how I'm going to create the mood board. And then I would kind of create the vision board, like really that mood board based off of their Pinterest board ideas, perhaps, but making it more realistic to their venue and how that would look. And here's where I feel like I went wrong. And after my conversation with other wedding planners, I'm like, oof, I might change this. So I was basically showing them a vision, but it didn't have a price tag on it. I'm like, this is what you want, right? This is the vibe. Yes, or let's change this. So we'd go back and forth on a couple revisions. Once it was approved, I started searching for vendors that met that aesthetic and I would basically present a couple options to the clients. But what I don't love about that is that they were then choosing based off price of those proposals that were coming in. So let's say I was like, "Hey, both love both of these florists. I think they can do a great job. Here's both of those their proposals." And they're not experienced, right? Like that's on me. They don't know what they're looking at. They're like, "Oh, well, this one's cheaper. Let's do that one." And then I'm like, "Oh, well, actually that one doesn't include candles." So and they're like, "Oh, we'll DIY the candles." And then I'm shooting myself in the foot. I'm like, "No, don't DIY candles." So
My worst nightmare, people who
worst
DIY
nightmare.
candles. It's awful. Don't
It's
do
the
it, please.
worst.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take much longer with the design process and I am going to have a number at the end of it. I will choose the vendors. I'm not saying that my couples don't get a choice in them, but I hope that they trust me enough that I will choose a vendor that I think meets their aesthetic and matches the overall budget that we're going in, that we're working within. And I will say, here's the vision, here is the number that it's going to cost you. What do you think about everything? Let's talk about it. And if they want to tweak something, I will tweak it on that vendor's invoice. If they really hate something, I'll be like, "Okay, let me swap out that vendor." But I think this goes back to if any of you listened to a previous episode about hospitality and how there's a bit of a decline in hospitality in the wedding industry. This for me will help prevent hiring vendors who are not qualified, who I haven't vetted before and who may not match the level of expectation that I have for them for our clients. So that was a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how our design package is happening right now and how we're transitioning. How are you doing yours?
I have a question about that. Do you feel like you'll get pushback from clients who want to see their options and like get to know like the different vendors?
Possibly. Um, I don't know. I will report back once I've implemented this a few times. I think what I've more so received is the opposite, where they're overwhelmed with the number of proposals they have to sort through, and they're expecting a more full service experience where they
Mm-hmm.
want me to present them the design and the total number within what they've told me about their style and their aesthetic and all that kind of stuff. So I'm like, yeah, if that was me and I had the money to hire a full service planner, I would kind of prefer that. But to your point, if there's a couple that's like, we really want to be part of the process of selecting our
Right.
vendors, then I might say, hey, here's my top choice and here's the proposal included in this total number. But if you need a couple more options, I'd be happy to reach out to one or two more.
For sure. Yeah. No, I think for full planning, that's definitely a great approach because I think people are hiring us for full planning because they don't want to spend the time reviewing all of these vendors and like vetting them and stuff. They just want to go with who you recommend. So, yeah, that's actually really great. And I should implement that more for full planning clients because I think a lot of times they are like still overwhelmed when I do give them the options of different vendors. And it does kind of come down to like, well, why wouldn't we pick the other one if you say they're equally as great and that other one's a little bit cheaper? And then I'm trying to make my case of like, well, the other one's maybe a little bit more creative or like can nail your design a little bit better. But it is hard at that point to get the client to go that direction unless they're like, we absolutely love their work. Because one of my clients right now, that happened with the catering company. Even though the other catering company was significantly lower, they were like, no, we're gonna pay more and go with the other one because it just feels right, like the aesthetic and the vibe for our wedding. So really with them, I could have just proposed that vendor and like, hey, here's the cost. Are you willing to go over? And so yeah, I think for our design boards, I have always taken like Pinterest photos, created a more honed in version of their Pinterest boards because usually they are a little bit all over the place. Um, and then try to add in rental options. And those are typically where I will offer those price points. But usually on the florals, that kind of goes back and forth of like, well, this was the arch that you want, but that one's really expensive. So here's like a version of that we can do. So there's a lot of refining throughout the process and updating of the design board once we get quotes. Because I think sometimes for my clients, they need to actually see a proposal before they make a decision that they're like, actually, you know what? I don't need that. I thought I did. And then they kind of realize what actually is really important to them. And then we sort of reallocate certain budget items or like line items within their budget.
Yes. And you brought up a good point. There is a lot of refining happening. And I think what I also learn from the other planners is when they put together this big, and I'm talking like this one planner, I think had something like 86 pages in her design. Like it was so detailed and so comprehensive. Like it had layouts, it had 3D mock-ups, it had the chair options, like you said. And then the big price tag at the end of it, in this case, let's say full service planning, where we're really talking about every vendor, they said this more or less, this is the minimum you're willing to commit to. And I thought that was interesting, the minimum, because they've designed, like they have had to ask them very detailed questions in order to come up with such a comprehensive design. So that was the other piece to this was like, I need to ask better questions during the design meeting that
Hmm.
lead me to one decision or another, and also to help back up my design. If I present them with something and they're like, it's too expensive. Wait, 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 wait. It's not too expensive. This is what you told me you absolutely had to have. This is the vision. This is the feel, all that stuff. So I want to be better at backing up my design, but also the minimum was just interesting because she's taken all this time to design, get quotes, and really like knock this design out of the park that she asks them to sign off on. Of course, there could be a few modifications, but sign off once they've agreed to the whole concept. They sign off on agreeing that this will be the minimum and that they can upgrade things from there, but we are not downgrading. And I was like, I kind of like that. I'd have to learn how to be confident in selling that. But also, how many times have you had it happen where you go off and start creating this beautiful mood board, and then the couple like kind of says, I don't need that, or I don't know, I liked it,
Hmm.
but it's too expensive. And it's always like cut down, cut down, cut down. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, well, here's another wedding with a garland, you know? And I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah. Because I think for some of my clients at the end of the day, some of those details that I would love to spend more money on, like signage or like paper goods, like stationery, they're like, oh, let's just like do something a little bit cheaper, or like we'll just create that design and get it printed. And you're like, dang it. Because I think they just are like, we have maybe overspent on other categories. And so now they're like trying to find ways to cut back, which does kind of dig into like the design elements that we feel are important, but they're like, whatever, it's fine. We'll just cut back on those budgets.
Yeah. Ugh, yeah. Okay, Carrie, how do you go and start researching quotes? Because obviously we've touched on this a little bit, but do you like when you reach out to a vendor, do you have a solid idea of line by line what you want? And that then you go and present that to the client, or how do you do that?
So, yeah, I think for florists, I will typically in our kickoff call, or maybe it's the second meeting, kind of talk through like the floral elements that they are important to them, what that vision looks like. And then sometimes I'll add in, what I feel is necessary and try to get the full picture because they don't know, right? Sometimes it's like they didn't think, oh, I need a floral arrangement on the welcome table or on the cocktail table, stuff like that. So I go in with our expertise and get a full proposal. And sometimes I'll work with the florist of like, hey, here's sort of the dream scenario. Can you give us two proposals? One for that dream scenario that includes everything, and then maybe one that's just slightly below that if we take out X, Y, and Z, or maybe we repurpose these elements instead. That way I can propose these, quotes to the couple and say, hey, this is the dream scenario one that you wanted. This has everything and it's top of budget, or there's this other option which can still be equally as beautiful, but it's not going to have X, Y, and Z. And so I think that helps clients to really see the vision and like what that budget looks like too. So I love being able to work with vendors in that way of like, hey, this is the full shebang, and then
Mhm.
here is like a little bit of a downgrade, still really beautiful, but still a healthy budget.
Do you do that
Um,
for each vendor? Do you get like a dream budget and a
Not
like
every
acceptable?
vendor. I feel like photography, video, stuff
Right.
like
That's
that. I
true.
have more of like a hard like, hey, this is how many hours I for sure know we need. The client's interested in video or like film. I would say with rentals and florists is kind of the one that I'm like, here's a dream scenario of rentals and like linens that we can add, and then here's like a second option that's still really beautiful, but just like another way to design and bring your vision to life. So I guess, yeah, florists and rentals are kind of the two
Yeah,
that I work in that manner.
that makes sense.
What about you?
Well, we're changing it
Do you,
up, you know? I
yeah,
f-
that's true.
I feel like I honestly do feel like it was a little bit of the Wild West, and it was not design was not my forte. Um I really would just kind of do my best guess at putting together, like you said, the rental order and what we need floral wise and all that kind of stuff. And I think the reason like that other planner said this is our minimum is because we know things are going to change at the end. So when we put those items together, there might be a guest count increase or decrease. There might be yeah, they want to add flowers next to the seating chart and they didn't think they wanted a seating chart before. Like things kind of happen and are added on. But I guess at the beginning it's really that bare minimum, but also like their dream wedding at the same time. But I do like the idea
Yeah.
of doing like here's your vision option one, more minimalized, I guess. And here's your vision option two, that's really your dream vision based off of all these grand florals that you have on your mood board. Knowing very
Hmm.
well it's outside of their budget, but like some people might say, yeah, florals are so important to us. We want to splurge and we just didn't know how much it costs. That's the other part of this too, is
Right.
like they don't know what things cost. I mean, we barely do.
Yeah. It's so true. I feel like vendors that I used to know how much their like minimums were or what they typically charged, I have no idea anymore. And
No.
so I think that's what makes it hard to estimate budgets initially for clients, because I'm like, even my preferred vendors are always changing their prices, rightfully so, but it's just hard to keep up with all of those vendors on what their new pricing structures are. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely doing the research and, getting the proper quotes and visions to clients. Yeah.
What do you do, I guess a couple scenarios perhaps of things that happen often, like let's say you've done all this work and then there is a total change. Like I have had this happen where they're like, "You know what? This is getting out of hand expensive. We decide we want to elope and we'll still pay for you, but I don't know, we're eloping and we're changing our venue." Like, is there a consequence or are you going with it?
Oh, that one's a hard one. I guess, are they still paying like your same package and for all the work that you've already done?
I
I'd assume
guess
so,
so.
right? Like,
Yeah, they can't be that stupid. They have to know that.
yeah. I mean, I guess at that point, I'm like, hey, if you're going to pay me the same amount, but I guess that would also depend because, like, how much more extra work are we
Right.
having to like redesign everything?
Right.
Because I do have a clause in my contract of like, if you want to redesign your wedding, so I guess that could look like you're eloping now versus getting married down at a local venue. There is a fee for that.
Yeah.
So even though you're still paying the package for a downgraded wedding that you were going to pay for a full wedding, it's like you're still changing the design and like we still have to do way more work than on top of the work that we already did. So
True.
yeah, I definitely add a fee for that, but I haven't honestly had it happen. Most of the changes I feel like have been small enough that I haven't implemented a fee that it was like a whole design overhaul.
Same. Yeah. What also happens when do you have clients who are super indecisive and they like maybe it is that situation of they've been presented too many options and they don't know what to pick? Like, are they choosing off of price alone, or how do you help them get through that?
Yeah, I had a client last year who was like that. She was wonderful, but she was definitely, once she saw all the options, she was having a hard time deciding. But then she would like always pick the most expensive items. And then we would be designing it. And then she'd be like, okay, well, how much is this? And then they'd tell her, and she's like, oh my God, what? And so then it was like us refining the process and looking at different rentals and different items. And those are hard because I think sometimes that's where I'm like, I love this look. And then they're like, oh, I
Hmm.
don't know. Let's maybe
Yeah.
switch these things out. We'll cheapen the linen or the
Yeah.
plate. And I feel like sometimes it goes against what I want. But also at the end of the day, if they're like, oh my God, I love this look,
Yeah.
then I feel like I kind of have to go with it. Unless I'm like, this doesn't look good at all. Um, if they're like that's what they want and that's the
Yeah.
look that they want, sometimes it's like, okay, let's revisit this and I'll mock that up and
Mhm.
create that in the vision. Which I think is tricky because sometimes it's like they are too in the pricing and the design of
Mhm.
everything that I'm like, if I wouldn't have given them all of these options, I should have just been like, here's option A and option B, and it just would have
Right.
been easier for their brain to comprehend
Well, that's
instead
why
of like seen everything at the rental store and then they're like overwhelmed and like picking the
yes.
most expensive items. And like we go into that being like, I know that wine glass over there cost way more than this other one just because we know the difference in like those specialty items.
Well, that's
But
exactly
clients
why.
don't, so that's hard.
Right. Well, and that's exactly why I want to start switching up my process and test it out. I will report back on how it goes, but the overwhelm is something that's a problem for my clients. Um, the something you said made me think of something that now I can't remember. Oh, and then I start panicking because I can't remember it. We'll have to cut this out.
It's okay.
Anyway, that's
Was
probably,
it all right? It's fine.
but
What are we at? 20 minutes. Okay.
yeah, yeah, we're good for this mini-sode. Um,
All right, bye.
but okay, I'll do an outro. Um, anyway, I feel like we could go on about budgets. It's fascinating. I'd love to hear from other jabbers just to know like how are you guys doing this process and are your clients even listening to you and do you have it down pat? And if you do, can we copy your strategy because we need to know.
We do. We do.
But as always, Jabbers, thanks for tuning in for this mini-sode. We will catch you in 2 weeks for another episode of Just Another Podcast. Just Another Podcast. Let me restart that. As always, Jabbers, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Just Another Biz Podcast. We will catch you again in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Good job.